While I was teaching, I had a revelation, and that was I wanted the students to learn more than the students wanted to learn themselves. And that made teaching excruciating for me.
Welcome to Physicists in the Wild. My name is Aggie Branczyk. In this series, we chat with physicists who pursued careers outside of academia. In this episode, we chat with Jay Lowell, who did his PhD in AMO Physics and is now a Principal Senior Technical Fellow at Boeing.
I went to the Air Force Academy out of high school. What I thought when I went there was that I wanted to fly fighter planes. That's what I thought was cool. I was in my freshman year and got to the point where I had to choose a major, and I was really interested in two areas of study that I'd had. One was physics and the other was history. And I sat down with my advisor and he gave me some great advice at the time. He said, if you want to study physics, you can't jump in and out. You have to commit, but you can always take extra history classes on top of physics, but you can't do it the other way around. So I said, I like physics. I'll take physics and I'll take extra history classes. And that's what I did. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm getting ready to graduate and I go get the results of my flight physical, which is basically telling me whether I'm physically qualified to go fly an airplane. And I get the result back and it says, you're not qualified to fly an airplane in the Air Force. I was devastated at the time. I did not know what to do. And so I was like, well, thank God I'm good at physics because I can go do that now. I ended up getting a scholarship out of out of that graduating class where they sent you off to get a one-year master's. Mm-hmm. So the idea was by sending me off to get a master's degree, I would be prepared and able to come back and teach eventually as an active duty officer who could talk to the students about what it's like to be an officer in the Air Force, working in the physics career field, and having an advanced degree that would make it easy to do that. I finished my master's and I got assigned to go to Hanscom Air Force Base, which is outside of Boston. The Air Force had a lab there. It's right across the street from MIT Lincoln Labs. And then I got a different job. I got asked to basically manage the stand-up of a data analysis facility for a satellite experiment. And I thought this was great. I thought this was a job that I was going to do for several years. And then I got a call from the personnel officer at the Air Force Academy Department of Physics. And they said, how would you like to go to graduate school and get your PhD? And I said, of course, I've always wanted to do that. Once I shifted from being a pilot, my mind was, I'm going to go teach, and then I'm going to be able to be a professor at the academy and teach cadets because I think I'm going to be really good at that. And I think I'm going to really enjoy it. So I said, yes. The professor helped me put in an application. They accepted my application, which it turns out schools are great to have you come in at the last minute if you're bringing your own money. If you're paying your way and they don't have to have a grant or anything to pay for you, it's easy to get into a PhD program as long as you meet the basic qualifications. And I say that because a lot of people think that there's this huge hurdle of, oh my God, getting into a program is the hardest thing in the world. There's a part of it that does make it hard, but it's the part you don't see as a student. It's the part that says they only have so much money that they can allocate back to students, and you're competing against slots for that money. But there's always a way around that. And the way around that is find a different way to get money, and that will open different doors that you might have thought were closed.
That's good advice.
Don't limit yourself to only looking at what the school brings. See if there are other ways to go get a scholarship or a fellowship or something to help pay for that. For instance, industry is really good at paying for people to go get their PhD. If you can get that, you can go anywhere. You can choose the program. And that freedom, I think, is really important to have.
How does that work in practice? Would you have to first have an industry job and work there for a few years and then they
Often, yeah. And with our company, that's the way it works. If having worked at the company for a few years, you can apply for the program and they will essentially provide you funding for that PhD. You become a part-time employee and they pay for your degree while you continue your part-time employment. So there were good parts of the deal I got, right? I didn't have to be responsible for finding a scholarship at some university. The Air Force provided that. They provided my salary. The downside was they were only willing to have me be on campus 3 years.
Sounds like it would have been quite intense.
It set me up understanding how to work at a pace that was both sustainable and really heavy. I learned how to work hard. One of the more senior people at the company here, who used to be our CTO, he's retired now. He has a saying that constraints breeds innovation.
Yes.
So here I had a constraint of time. It got me in that discipline of, okay, here's how you structure your day to get through everything. So I finished my PhD and then I back to the academy where I'd gone as an undergraduate, and now I'm going there to teach mechanics, electromagnetics, first year majors lab, third year majors lab, stat mech thermodynamics were the things that I taught while I was there. So I didn't have as much time as I wanted to work in the lab. I got one experiment done in 4 years. So I was frustrated a little bit by that. I wanted to do good at everything that I can do. And I was in a position where I had to make a choice. I had to say, I can't do well at everything. I have to choose. I think it's fundamentally the way life is. If you're doing something that you're good at, you're going to be in a position where you have too much to do. And you have to choose what you're going to focus on, what you're going to prioritize. And you have to accept, as hard as it is, that the other things are going to be a lower priority. And so either the quality is going to suffer or the schedule is going to suffer. Something has to give. Again, one of those important life lessons that I've had to learn over and over and over again, because I keep putting myself in the position of wanting to do too much and keep being disappointed that I can't do it.
Yep, that's me as well. So
I think it's all of us, right? While I was there teaching, about the third year of teaching, I had a revelation. And I think it was one of those important pivot points in my career. And that was, I wanted the students to learn more than the students wanted to learn themselves. And that made teaching excruciating for me. And I realized I should not be here. That was a hard place to come to when I'd spent 10 years thinking that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But, it's not for everybody, and nor should it be. If everybody were teachers, there'd be no doers, right? So, one of the things I like about this podcast is that you explore these themes of, it's not what you should do, it's what do you want to do? And how is that matched with what the world offers in the terms of possibilities? I had about a year and a half left in my assignment. So now my question turned to a different one, which is, how do I go look for something that I might want to do? I had a friend at the department who was responsible for a summer program, and that summer program took faculty members and had them work with the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board. And he convinced me that I should go do this for a summer. And it opened my eyes to a completely different world, which is the world of kind of industrial side research. And then when it was coming time for me to look for another job, my department chair at the academy found out that one of the program managers at the Air Force Office of Scientific Research had retired. It was the person who had the portfolio of managing university-based atomic, molecular, and optical physics research. And they said, hey, we have one of one AMO physicist in the Air Force who's coming up for assignment. Wouldn't it be great to put him in that job?
That's perfect.
So I got lucky. Everybody talks about their career as having these things that are kind of part of you, right? That you have this agency and direction and ability to steer things. And then there are always these things that are coincidence and luck and happenstance. This was one of those.
But it's also about being prepared for when luck strikes.
And I was in a position, right? I made the case. I'd be great for this job. So I got it.
How long did you stay in that role?
1 year.
1 year, okay. So you loved it.
I loved it, but I got a better offer. And so I moved from AFOSR to DARPA to start these applied atomic, molecular, and optical physics research programs. That kind of completed that transformation, if you will. And that from that point forward, that's who I saw myself as. I'm an applied researcher. That's what I'm good at. I feel really privileged to be able to work on that kind of stuff because I feel like it's not just doing research, but it's doing research in a way that pays back the world by making something that's positive, that brings positive value to the world. I stayed at DARPA for 7 years. I ran 17 different research programs while I was there. I started 9 of them. I was like a kid in a toy store, just whatever I could see and envision and think through and make a plausible path for how we could take some new capability and apply it in a new and interesting way that I could make a good sound argument for, I got to go do. And then I did something that a lot of people have since told me that was the stupidest thing, but at the same time was smart. I walked away from it. I was doing all this while I was in the Air Force. And I got to the point where I had my 20 years in the Air Force and I was ready to retire from the Air Force and go work as a civil, kind of have my second career, if you will. I went to a software company to learn software architecture, software program management. How do you structure that software? How do you build it? And how do you then assemble teams that can do that and manage that work? I feel like I did that. And then I got to the point where it's like, oh, wait, there's nothing more for me to learn here. And so then I knew I needed to leave. I needed to go back and put myself in the position that I really wanted to be, which was where I could work on problems that were big enough that they needed all of my skills.
Right.
They needed my understanding of how hardware things are done and my understanding of how you build software so that I could put them all together and do work. And that's why I came to Boeing. Most of the time I've been at Boeing, we're working on completely different areas of technology. I started out evaluating research, and then we had an incident on one of our airplanes with the lithium-ion battery. So I was brought in to help figure out what went wrong. I said, I'm not a lithium-ion battery expert. They said, no, you're not. But you see problems and you see solutions. And right now, we have a problem. We don't understand why it's a problem. So we don't know how to solve it. We need somebody who can see the problem. So we got to do invention, and those inventions are again, contributing to the betterment of the world by making the flying public safer.
Thanks for that. I'm sure your job at Boeing is very varied, and it might be difficult to describe a typical day, but would you like to give a stab at describing what your day-to-day is like?
There is no typical day. I think a better way for me to think about it is there are 3 kinds of weeks. There are travel weeks. There are kind of your standard week. And then there's what I call everything, you just throw it out the window and you're just juggling weeks. I really have 4 jobs at Boeing: quantum research, what we call high fidelity digital twin or validation of software and hardware research, facilities development, and external relations. Actually, there's a 5th job too, I forgot about, which is I support all of these proprietary programs because I have this broad technical expertise. So a standard week, I'm constantly juggling and having to come to grips that I'm not doing as well on one of those 5 things as I should be doing, which gets back to the theme of I want to do well in everything, but I've had to learn that you can't do well in everything all the time. You're constantly going to be disappointed somewhere because you prioritize, but you've got to prioritize in order to be effective at all. And you've got to accept the choice that you make on how you do that.
I want to come back to something that we mentioned earlier. So you've been in kind of 3 different careers in government and education and in industry. And I wonder if you'd like to make some comparisons or contrast those different careers.
There's some similarities between the government and academia that aren't always apparent, but really it comes into The government and academia, the time scale of interest of a particular problem is typically very long. They're patient, if you will. They're willing to take the long view and dive in to the details and invest the time and energy and effort to do that. I'm going to contrast that with industry. Industry is, we need to solve a problem. We need to turn that solution into monetary value because that's how the company stays afloat. If you like that kind of variety, if you get bored looking at the same thing over and over again, industry is going to be much more to your liking because the fundamental mindset of industry is to move from thing to thing to thing. In academia, it's really hard to establish yourself if you jump from subject to subject to subject. You have to have that long-term view and take the time to dive in deep. And on the government side, you can kind of move a little bit more fluidly between the two. Mm-hmm. There are places in the government where you can have a short-term mindset, but they still are structured to enable that longer-term view.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jay. It was amazing hearing about your career. It's been quite a spectacular journey.
Well, I'm fortunate to find myself here, and I hope that all of your audience is able to find themselves in similar places in their career where they are in a place that matches their skills and their desires, and they're happy. So there's a thing in the strategy world that says you're either a fox or a hedgehog. While I like that, I think the sea otter is an example of something that's sort of in the middle. It's committed to a life in the ocean, but it behaves more like a fox. It spends enough time on the land that it can work around problems that it sees in the water.